I was 25 when it happened. Maybe 26. I used to do solo backpacking trips a few times a year, almost always somewhere in the Appalachians. I'd drive to a remote trailhead, hike deep into the backcountry, well off any marked trail, and disappear for days. No cell service, no people, nothing. My friends thought I was insane. Honestly, they weren't wrong. This particular trip was in Pisgah National Forest, in the mountains of western North Carolina. It changed the way I see backpacking forever. I'd been out there for 2 days, and everything had gone perfectly. The weather held, the trail was silent, and I hadn't seen another human being since the first morning. I was deep in that raw, uncomplicated peace that only comes when you're truly alone in wild country. That peace ended on the afternoon of the second day. Dark clouds built fast to the west. But within an hour, the wind picked up hard, and the temperature dropped fast enough that I stopped mid-stride to pull on another layer. By the time the first drops hit, I was already scanning for shelter. And then the sky opened up. The wind was bending smaller trees sideways. Branches cracked and fell through the canopy above me. Lightning struck close enough that I felt it more than heard it. I kept moving, completely soaked, scanning both sides of the trail for anything that might count as cover. That's when I saw it through the trees. A structure, small, dark, half swallowed by the forest. It looked like it had been sitting there for decades. A hunting shelter maybe, a homesteader's leftover. I didn't care what it was. I practically sprinted to the door and shoved it open. Inside, dim, dry and bad smelling. I stripped out of my soaked clothes and lay down on the floor without a second thought. It took maybe 10 or 15 minutes before I started actually looking around. A sleeping bag rolled up in the corner near the cot. And unlike everything else in the place, it didn't look ancient. Someone had been using this place as a base camp not long ago. The marks near the door stopped me cold. I could see they were scratches, dozens of them, some shallow, some deep, driven into the wood in no particular pattern or order. There was a metal bracket on the outside of the frame, designed to hold a padlock. On the outside, there was no corresponding latch on the inside. The door could only be locked from the outside. Screws had been driven into the frame at each corner, sealing it shut. Also from the outside, and around the inner edges of the frame, there were more scratches, deep ones, the kind you make with your fingernails when you've run out of options. Someone had been kept here, locked in, against their will. So I stayed. A scraping, scratching noise somewhere along the left exterior wall. Then came 2 heavy thumps on the porch. Gee, and those didn't sound like storm sounds at all. I did the thing where you freeze completely still and stare at a fixed point and try to focus all your hearing on one direction. My eyes drifted to the window. I couldn't make myself look through it. If someone was outside, they'd be looking through it right back at me. Pressure on the door, heavy sustained weight pressing against it from the outside. The wood groaned, the latch rattled once. Then the pressure released. Maybe whoever was out there didn't want to come inside. Maybe they wanted me to stay in. I started moving things into my pack as fast as I could, heart hammering, that sick specific feeling of something being wrong spreading through my chest. I was maybe 30 seconds from the door when I heard the glass shatter behind me. And then the room erupted in fire. I threw myself at the door. It was jammed. I hit it again, full force, and it gave. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I couldn't see anything. I was just crashing through the woods in the rain and the dark, branches staring at my face, legs pumping on pure adrenaline. Then something hit me from behind, and I was on the ground. He was screaming, gouging at my eyes, going for my throat. I got a foot against him and shoved him off. I found my footing and ran again, and the sound of screaming followed me into the dark. I looked back twice. The cabin was fully engulfed. A fireball through the trees, orange light bleeding into the rain. But I didn't stop running until my legs simply quit. I found 2 fallen trees crossed against each other, a narrow gap beneath them that blocked most of the rain. I crawled in and collapsed. At some point, feelings started returning to my body, and I gave myself a single instruction: move or die. I stumbled through the dark forest without knowing where the trail was, not caring either. Eventually, the rain pulled back enough for me to get some bearings. I found a random trail and followed it until I reached a trailhead. The storm was over. The first person I saw drove me to a hospital. Second-degree burns on my left forearm and the back of my neck. Someone had pre-treated that cabin with something flammable. There's no other explanation for how fast it went up. Someone had set it up, and they'd been waiting. My wife thinks I stopped doing solo trips because I finally grew up. She's not entirely wrong, but she doesn't know about this. She's never going to know about this. And I know in my bones that I will never go into the backcountry alone again. I've been doing solo camping trips since my 20s. I'm in my late 30s now, so that's close to 15 years of backcountry travel. I know the risks. That's why I carry a rifle. This happened about 2 years ago in Shawnee National Forest, in the southern tip of Illinois. It's remote country down there, sandstone bluffs, deep hollows, old-growth timber, and if you know where to go, you can walk for days without crossing another human being. I needed exactly that. Work had been grinding me down, and my head wasn't in a good place. I needed distance from everything. I drove out on a Thursday morning, parked at a trailhead off a Forest Service road, and started hiking. The plan was simple: 3 nights in the backcountry. I had my tent, 4 days of food and water, and my point, 308 bolt action. The first day was exactly what I'd come for. I covered about 7 miles before finding a flat spot near a creek bed and making camp. Fire going by sunset. Cooked, ate, drank 1 beer, fell asleep listening to the water. No one else anywhere. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night, not from a sound, more like my brain just switched on the way it sometimes does in unfamiliar places. I lay still, staring at the ceiling of the tent. Then I noticed the glow, a faint orange light bleeding through the walls. I unzipped the tent flap and looked out. About 200 yards through the trees, there was a fire, campfire-sized, flickering. I watched it for several minutes, waiting to hear voices or movement. Nothing. It wasn't growing or spreading, so I ruled out a wildfire. Or so I figured it was another camper who'd gone to sleep with their fire still burning. Irresponsible, but not my problem. In the morning, curiosity got the better of me. I packed up and hiked toward where the fire had been. I found the clearing. The right distance, the right direction, the right angle. But when I stepped into it, I stopped. No fire pit, no ash ring, no scorched earth, no charred wood. The ground was completely undisturbed, like no one had stood there in months. I walked the entire clearing, searching for any evidence of a fire or a human presence. Nothing. The area was pristine. I stood there for a long time, genuinely confused. And then I moved on. I hiked most of the day, moving deeper into the forest. The terrain climbed and changed. By mid-afternoon, I was in a denser section where the trees were old and tall and the canopy closed out most of the sky. It was quieter in there. I liked it. I found a campsite around 4 o'clock, made dinner, and turned in a little after 9. Doused the fire first. As the sound that woke me felt like it came from inside the ground. A massive cracking. The kind that doesn't just hit your ears, but moves through your body. I knew immediately what it was. A tree had come down somewhere south of me, a big one. No storm, no wind. Calm, still night. I lay there, running through explanations and coming up empty. Trees fall, sure. Disease, root failure, structural weakness, but the conditions were wrong. There was no reason for it. 10 minutes later, it happened again. Louder this time. Close. 2 trees, same night, no weather, different parts of the forest. Then the third sound started, low, continuous, coming from somewhere outside the tent, but no specific direction I could pin down. I can only describe it as a cross between a groan and a growl, the sound you make when you clear your throat, stretched out and sustained and made by something with much more mass behind it. It wasn't a bear. I've heard bears. Not an elk. Not a bobcat. This was nothing from the catalog of animal sounds I'd built up over 15 years of solo travel, and it went on. A full minute. Maybe longer. No variation, no break. I grabbed my rifle, chambered around as quietly as I could manage, and aimed it at the tent flap. I sat like that for 20 minutes. Eventually, the sound faded. Not a hard stop, but a gradual dimming. Like whatever was making it had moved further away. And then the forest went quiet again. Completely quiet. The kind of quiet that feels deliberate. I didn't sleep. When daylight came, I got out of the tent and packed quickly. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I hiked toward the second tree. I found it after about 10 minutes. Massive, its trunk lying at an angle across a shallow slope, a debris field of broken branches spread across a wide radius, so it was real. It hadn't been a dream or a trick of exhaustion. I went to the stump. The break wasn't clean. Wind stress and root failure leave a specific kind of fracture, jagged, splintered, the wood failing under load. This was different. The wood at the break point looked like it had been worked. Long, irregular grooves ran through the exposed grain at different angles. Some were an inch deep at least. The bark around the base had been stripped away in long sections, and the wood beneath showed that same gouged, chewed apart texture across a surface area far too large for any animal I could identify. This tree hadn't fallen. It had been brought down. I stepped back from the stump. That nauseating instinct, the one that exists somewhere below thought, told me to leave. Now, I was turning to go when something near one of the fallen branches caught my eye. A small cluster of items on the ground, too deliberately placed to be debris. I walked over. A blue bandana, a carabini, both mine. I opened my pack and checked. Both items were gone from where I kept them. Something had been in my camp while I was sleeping. It had gone through my pack, taken 2 items, walked them through the dark forest, and left them arranged near a tree. It had apparently torn apart with its hands. I didn't think. I ran. The hike back took most of the day. At the whole time, I felt watched. Not the abstract paranoia of being alone in the woods. Something more specific, more physical. Like something was pacing me through the timber at a comfortable distance, in no particular hurry. I kept my rifle up. I didn't stop moving. I made it back to my car around 3 in the afternoon. I drove until the forest was well behind me. Then I pulled over and called the police. They didn't take me seriously. I didn't expect them to. What I couldn't stop coming back to was this. From the unexplained fire on the first night, to the fallen trees, to the sound I couldn't name, to my belongings appearing at the base of a demolished trunk. It was all connected. Something had known where I was the entire time. Watching, following, not attacking, not fleeing, just making sure I knew it was there. I still go camping. I know that probably sounds insane given everything, but those woods are part of who I am, and I refuse to let something I can't explain take that from me. What I can't resolve, what I suspect I'll never resolve, is what that thing was. What tears apart a tree trunk and leaves your belongings at the base like a calling card. What produces a sound that doesn't belong in any field guide. What builds a fire that leaves no ash and walks through a dark forest without a light. I don't think it was human. As for what else it could have been, I genuinely don't know, and I've spent 2 years trying to figure that out. My name is James. This was about 7 or 8 years ago, when I was in my early 20s and still in the phase of life where a bad idea just sounds like a good story waiting to happen. My friend Marcus was the engine behind most of those bad ideas. He had this gift, or curse, for finding places you weren't supposed to be. Abandoned factories, old mills, shuttered asylums. If something had been left to rot in some forgotten corner of the country, Marcus had probably already been inside and written down exactly how to get in. And most of our friends would hear his pitches and say, "That sounds insane." I'd say, "When are we going?" One weekend, Marcus texted me about a fire lookout tower it found deep in a national forest a few hours from us. Decommissioned years ago, completely untouched. We drove out on a Friday morning, 3 hours there, then a 4-mile off-trail hike into the woods. I was half convinced we'd get lost, and the tower would turn out to be a rumor. So, when we actually saw it rising through the trees, I said, out loud, to no one in particular, "No way." It was tall, really tall, and completely unguarded. No fence, no gate, no signs, no chain. Marcus was already climbing before I finished my assessment. I yelled at him to slow down, and to his credit, he did. The vertical ladder section near the top was the most unsettling. 20-something feet of straight vertical climb. The view made it worth it. Miles of unbroken treetop in every direction. The sun was an hour from setting, which we timed perfectly. When the light was finally gone, the forest below us disappeared completely. There wasn't a single artificial light anywhere on the horizon. Being up there in the dark started getting to me. It was the absence of visual reference that did it. I knew there was an entire forest below us, but I couldn't see any of it. It was like floating in space. Marcus could tell I was getting antsy. He started messing with me, grabbing my shoulder, faking jumps the way he always did when he sensed he had an advantage. The thing that finally got me wasn't that. It was when he grabbed his metal water bottle and slammed it against the side of the tower. The clang rang out across the forest like a bell. I told him we were going inside the cab. He said he'd finish his beer first. I went in without him and started setting up my sleeping bag. Then he spoke to me in a voice I'd never heard from Marcus before. Quiet, flat, serious. "Come back out here." I went. He was pointing diagonally downward into the forest. At first I thought he was messing with me again. And then I saw it. A light, moving through the trees at walking pace, weaving between the trunks in a slow, steady arc. My immediate thought was that someone had heard the clang and was coming to investigate. He pointed out that the light wasn't moving the way a person's light moves. No swinging, no wobbling, After about 10 minutes, the light reached the base of the tower and stopped. It sat directly below us, perfectly still. No voice called up, no footsteps, no announcement. We stared at it for half an hour. Then Marcus, because of course he did, cupped his hands and yelled down, "Hey, you good down there?" No response. The light didn't move. He yelled again. Still nothing.
So there we were, 70 feet up in an
70
abandoned
feet
fire
up
lookout.
in an
Someone or
abandoned fire
something
lookout.
standing directly below us
Someone
without
or
speaking or
something
moving.
standing
We couldn't
directly
climb down
below us
without going
without
through them.
speaking or moving. We couldn't climb down without going through them. Eventually, I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it straight down at the base of the tower. We decided to go inside the cab and wait it out. We settled into our sleeping bags, facing different windows, so we had coverage in all directions. About 20 minutes later, the sound started, not footsteps. I want to be clear about that because I was listening specifically for footsteps. These were metallic. These clangs that rang up through the steel frame of the structure, like someone striking a support beam with a heavy tool. The sounds kept coming from what seemed like different spots around the base of the tower. Then I saw the silhouette. I was sitting against the far wall of the cab when a dark shape moved across one of the windows. I told myself it was a trick of light, and then it passed across the next pane over, and there was no explaining it away. I yelled. Marcus scrambled back from the window. We both pressed ourselves against the door. If someone was going to come through that door, they were going to have to move us first. We sat like that for the rest of the night. When gray light finally crept up through the trees, I counted to 3 and kicked the door open. No one was there. The walkway was empty. We grabbed our gear and started down as fast as we dared. Marcus stopped on a landing about 3/4 of the way to the ground. I nearly ran into him. He was staring down at the next section of staircase. An entire section was gone, not a step or two. An entire span of the staircase. Just absent, removed. Someone had dismantled a piece of a steel staircase while we sat directly above them, in the dark, while we were listening specifically for sounds of movement. We jumped the gap. Marcus twisted his ankle on the landing. I cleared it clean. We made it the rest of the way to the ground and walked out of the forest without looking back. There was nothing at the base. No person, no light, no removed stair sections lying in the grass. I've never been able to explain any of it. Not the light, not the sounds, not the shadow across the window, not the missing stairs. Every time Marcus and I see each other, we talk about it. We always end up in the same place. No answers. Just the memory of that dark forest, 70 feet below us, doing something we couldn't understand.